Hello, everyone. Can you believe it's September? My goodness. Time flies when we're having fun. I am super excited today. I'm always excited. I love actually having these Conscious Educator Playground podcast sessions. And I am, as usual, joined by the amazing Shiba Rashada. And we are going to be talking today about measuring what matters. And how do we actually do this? How do we define what matters? How do we actually dive into a topic where it's like, all right, how do we get to a point where we agree on what matters? And getting to this place of alignment, right? Not only within ourselves, but within our teams, within our families, within, our colleagues. What does that look like? What does it look like with our students? And so for those of you that are joining us live, as you can see, I'm coming to you from a different location. And I am kind of out here on a mom's son trip. I'm on the East Coast right now and doing a little house hunting. Gonna see what this quote unquote gap year, I'm doing it again, Shiba, is going to to be like in my world, and just checking some things out. So super excited to dive into this topic. Shiba, when you think about measuring what matters, how do you define what matters as a human? Let's talk about that first. How do you define, quote unquote, what matters?
I guess if I'm defining or measuring what matters, that's going to be the things that align with my core values.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Is this something that brings me joy? Is this an issue that's going to give me peace?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how I measure what matters in my world.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to get to a place where you actually knew what those core values were in order to be able to know that that's what you were measuring against?
It definitely took, I had to be somewhere, I don't want to give my age away, but it definitely.
We don't have to do that.
Right. Well, but that's the thing. I think it takes time to develop that. I wasn't really able to do that like, late teens, early 20s.
Right.
It wasn't until I started working with children and really had my own children, because I had to start worrying about how my actions could enrich or diminish someone else's human nature, or their humanity, or their life experience. So I think once that happened, I really had to start thinking about what matters and how it aligned to what means most to me.
I think that's so common for us in our evolution as humans, that when we have children, no matter how they come into your life, when you start recognizing your impact on children, especially, whether they're your students that you call your babies, or your biological children, or your adopted children, or your foster children, or whatever it is, your nieces and nephews, you start spending enough time and recognizing that, they become little mini-me's, or in one way, shape, or form, good, bad, right, or wrong. Right. And they start modeling what they watch you do versus what you're saying to them. And recognizing, and I talk a lot about my value of gratitude, and really when I was able to articulate that to myself was when my son was around 3 years old, and being in this crazy mom state of throwing all of his stuff in garbage bags because he was going to be grateful for the love of all that's holy, right? And so and going, okay, wait a minute, this is not who I want to be. This is not how I want to parent. This is not how I want to show up in the world. And so therefore, like, getting to a place of, well, what does success look like? What kind of parent do I want to be? And this is true for any role that we play in life. It can be, what type of sister do I want to be? What type of friend do I want to be? What type of colleague do I want to be? What type of teacher do I want to be? What type of student do I want to be? Whatever role or hat you're wearing in life, when you have that aha moment of, wait, how do I show up intentionally here? And what does that look like? That's when we consciously or unconsciously get to that place where we're actually aligning our core values, right? Whether we're doing it intentionally or not, or using those words, that's really what's happening at the root of that evolution in our growth, in our maturity, in our consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And so when we start talking about measuring what matters, I think it's important to really kind of take a step back and go, okay, well, what are we measuring in the first place? And how do we know when we're measuring something that matters? Like, what makes it matter? And if you say matter often enough, it becomes a word that you wonder why it's a word.
Right.
Does anyone else do that with a word? All of a sudden you say it too often, or you're looking at it for too long and you're like, that has to be wrong. I don't know how to spell that anymore.
Right,
So,
right.
so, really getting to that anchored place of what does matter in your life. And Shiva, I think, you hit the nail on the head with it's aligned to our core values. And we're going to dive into more core values conversations. Obviously, that's at the core of my heart, and the work that I get to do in this life is helping people to stay in values alignment, whether that's through the culture transformation work that I do, or whether it's the one-on-one coaching, or really it's who I show up as a whole human. Is I'm constantly in a state, and it's really an aligned state for me, because growth and learning is one of my core values, is to be in a state of awareness of my nervous system, of when I am in or out of alignment with my values. And so then, in conversations with others, it comes up as well, just as we're all evolving together as a human race. So when we think about what next, right? Okay, so we define what success looks like, what matters, like what does that mean? What is that thing that matters? So let's take an example. If you think about what matters, think back to when you were a first year teacher. Let's talk about that. When you're a first year educator and you're trying to figure out what success looks like, because it's probably a little bit different than what you imagined, than what you dreamed of when you said, yep, sign me up. I want to be in a classroom full of students. And what was that like for you to really grow into that aligned version of success, on how you ended your day of, that was a successful day, or I had lots of opportunities for growth that day?
So I didn't come into the field wanting to be a teacher. I'm a trained librarian. So when I started teaching, I was a substitute teacher, and I was already a mom, so my youngest was in kindergarten when I started teaching that first year. And I think being a mom that had already had kids in school, success looked to me, well, this is the idea I came into the classroom with, is the kids were learning with a high amount of rigor, right? So excellence was going to be the bar for every student that walked through the door of the classroom wherever I was teaching. And every student had to feel valued, seen, and loved. So obviously when you're a sub, you're jumping from class to class. So I guess in those first days, if things weren't on fire, it was a good day.
Right?
Right. But when I started doing long-term assignments, so I was in classrooms, for 3, 4, 5 months at a time, and those really did become my babies. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I knew it was a successful day when the kids were happy. Mm-hmm. And I mean, happiness, that can change, because especially when you're with little ones, because I was in elementary school, but they were excited to go home and tell their parents about what they did that day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was getting hugs. I'll see you tomorrow. And they seemed excited to come back the next day.
Yeah.
And that for me is when I knew that we had had a successful day in the classroom. And I was teaching from, I didn't really know what my core values were then.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I look back, I was teaching in alignment with those values that I had for kids.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example. And I think it rings true for like I was saying earlier, anyone who is either raising a family or teaching students of any age. Because when you come in with that objective, and we're going to talk about objectives and key results next, with that objective being in alignment with your core values, that core objective being, what is that? Danielle Laporte calls them core desired feelings, like we talked about last week. What is that essence energy? There's so many different ways that we can phrase it, right? Find what is aligned for you. That what are they walking away with that is often on the intangible list? Because if you're talking about them walking away with happiness, and then you defined that happiness as like, how will you know? You defined it in a way of when they're excited to tell their parents about what we experienced that day or what we did that day. It's like that intangible, because how do you measure that? How do you actually quantify that intangible? And therefore, now how do we hold others accountable for that? Right? So we've defined it. What matters most is, for example, that happiness, that joy, that excitement, those core desired feelings is the objective for the end of each successful day. So that's what I want to measure. And that's the objective. And we back that into milestones or key results. And we'll talk about John Doerr's work in it in a minute. And we back that into those pieces that help us know that we're on the right track. So if you were to break that example down into micro moments, maybe they're macro moments, during a given day, to know that you're on the right track to that result happening at the end of the day, what might some of those be?
Well, and especially with the little ones, because if we're using that example,
yeah,
is when kids are open and receptive in the classroom, so much so that they're not afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to give the wrong answer because we've created a classroom culture together where it's safe to learn.
Yeah.
And so those were definitely the moments for me. I mean, there were some days where I would walk in my class down to specials, right? To PE or to whatever. And I would say goodbye. And when I would have 30 little bodies rush at me at one time to give me a group.
Yeah.
That's a macro moment that, like you said, it's not measurable, right? It's not quantifiable, so to speak.
Right.
But intuitively, I know that these kids feel safe and these kids feel loved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how I did it, Sandy.
Love it. And how many of those types of intangible, maybe tough to measure things would you say contribute to the, let's say one, and I know that there's more, core metric of something that you must comply with? So for example, test scores, right? You must comply with having X achievement on whatever in order for you to be an effective educator, a highly effective educator, or whatever you're being evaluated, right? So you have those concrete metrics. How many of those intangible metrics would you say that add up to then give you that outcome?
You know what? I don't even think I can put a number on it, but I will say, and I'm sure I'm speaking for many people who are educators, it's those intangible, right? Those intangible things that we're talking about that make me show up year after year.
Yeah.
So now as a high school teacher, 3 students that I taught last year all showed up in my class at one time and said, we told the counselor, we're not going to be able to have English unless it's with Miss Rashada.
Oh.
And that happened just yesterday.
Yeah.
And when we discussed our poetry, the 3 of them are like gathered around my desk and we're just discussing it together. So the test scores for me, I know some people say, well, it's more than a test score. It's not more than a test score it's important to me because my kids also need to be learning. So I don't want them to leave not having every single opportunity to do whatever it is they want to do,
right,
whether that be college or career. And the test scores show that they know how to show what they've learned. Yeah. So I don't have any problem doing that. But those intangible things, the smiles, I want to be here, this is where I feel safe. Yeah. Man, those things outweigh all of those other things that admin wants us to do.
Right. Because when we talk about trying to mandate what matters, and I've seen this in cultures, and I'm sure that you've seen it and experienced it as well. When someone tries to mandate and says, you must, and let's use the example of greeting your students at the door.
Sure.
And we know the science behind that can be a powerful activity and an invitation and an opening, and it starts the domino effect of all the things that you're talking about. And right. If you try to mandate that as a leader without creating that type of safe environment for your staff to show up that way, where you're modeling it and you're nurturing it and you're doing it with values aligned intention, you begin to miss the point where it just becomes another mandate. And I'm pretty sure that all of us have that teenager thread, I'll call it, running through our veins still, because you told me what? I have to do what? Even if at the core of it, you agree with it. Because as soon as you put it in the mandate column and you don't articulate the why and get the buy-in from the humans that are responsible for showing up that way every day and make sure that you have values alignment with them, you're going to struggle before you even start. And that's the missing piece when we run so fast in the world of education, in raising our children, in life. There's this frenetic energy to be success and do all the things. It's that hustle culture that we talked about. And we miss that vital component of aligning our values to the results that we're seeking and really making them key results that matter to us, not key results because someone said we have to. Because as soon as we make it a you have to, 99% of us that are humans go, but what if I don't wanna, right? That's it's our first little itty bitty shitty committee thought that happens before we get to that aligned action place. And so when we talk about this book, and this is a book that a lot of my colleagues and mentors there's so many, not only educators, but thought leaders and just people doing brilliant work in the world. I don't know how to throw them all into one bucket, but there's so many humans that are doing great work that really love John Doerr's work around measuring what matters in his book. And one of the things that I appreciate that he does, he actually talks about culture in here. He really layers in those components. And while it's not a culture book, he's talking about it in a very structured way. You know, we've talked about the steel dominant frequency. That's really more where his brain's coming from. But he does honor and acknowledge that human side in order to make sure that we have the foundational elements in place for a comprehensive, sustainable, positive culture, so that your objectives and key results are aligned to that. And when you align them to your core values, and he talks about that, that's when you get that increased productivity and innovation in any organization. And I want to use the term organization really loosely, because this can even happen in our families. This can even happen within our friend groups. This can happen. So when you get more than one person involved, and in all honesty, you can do it within yourself, because we all have the different voices in our heads that tell us different things at different times. And sometimes we end up arguing with ourselves, and it's like, well, I should do this, or I should do that. That's because we have the ability to be in or out of values alignment when it's a full body resonance, or if it's a fighting, I don't know, this push pull. Those are all different parts of us that are trying to come together to get to alignment. And there's a whole lot more that we could talk about there, which kind of dives into self-trust in some pieces. But I think when we talk about healthy communication, and this is with yourself, all the itty bitty cheerleading committees, itty bitty shitty committees going on upstairs, as well as our healthy communication with one another, and then aligning our values, ensuring that we are kind of enrolled in that authentic buy-in, not a fake buy-in because I have to, or words on the wall kind of buy-in, but truly, what do we all agree matters most to measure? And how are we going to then measure that? And then you establish the rewards that are around it. I mean, that becomes that habit. Oh my gosh, I totally just forgot the name of the book. But there's a few books out there that are on hacking habits and really making it easy to create new habits. And the reward loop is one of them that's really important. Shiva, do you know the
Atomic Habits by James?
Atomic Habits.
Is it James
Yes.
Clear? Okay.
That's what I was thinking. Thank you. I knew you would know. And it's like Shiva is a walking library. It's fantastic. We all should hang out with her more. It's brilliant. I'm like, that thing, habit. She's like, yep, got it. It's here. It's in her hand 5 seconds later. But those rewards help kind of complete that cycle in a recipe for success. And the rewards don't have to be buying yourself a yacht, although that's fun. I mean, if you want to buy yourself a yacht, like, go for it. I just want to come party if you do. So, but it doesn't have to be, it can be something simple where it's like, I'm going to, as soon as I finish this metric or this paper, I'm going to reward myself by meeting some friends to go bowling. I don't know. It can be something small. It can be as simple as I'm going to reward myself with, I was going to say some sort of chocolate or Hershey's Kiss. Like, I don't know, maybe it's time for an extra 30 minutes to sleep in, or maybe it's whatever it is. You can come up with whatever rewards. And Melissa Blinn, who's one of my best friends, and I just admire her work as a coach. She actually encourages a lot of her clients to make a list of all of the things that you consider rewards in life. And the more you write them down and the bigger your list becomes, and you start noticing, what do I see as a reward? Now you have a list to pull from, instead of, oh, I don't know what I want to do for this, is to actually make it an intentional practice to list all those things that you would consider a reward, whether it's investing in a cryptocurrency. That's a whole other topic. I'll invest another $5 in Ethereum or in Bitcoin if this is accomplished, whatever it is. There's lots of ways to do it. But then that becomes fun, and you begin to gamify your life and truly measure what matters. But it takes time and it takes practice. Shiva, how long have you, I know I've been doing it for decades. How long have you been practicing really staying in alignment to measure what matters most to you versus getting caught up in the messiness of life?
Right. I mean, and for me, I just think that's been within maybe the last 5 to 7 years. When I was giving those examples of my first year of teaching, I mean, it was just kind of intuition, but it wasn't intentional.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, within the last 5 to 7 years, really being intentional
Yeah.
about, aligning with my core values, as far as measuring what matters.
That's awesome. And again, we begin when we choose to and when we're ready. And it's not necessarily easy to begin. It's okay to, need training wheels for a bit. And that's really where this community comes in. And I'm so grateful for this conscious educator community and my Facebook community and my friends and my family and the support of all of us. We're in this together and really measuring what matters, and what matters to me at the core of who I am are the people in my life and that authentic connection that we all have. And I'm truly grateful for that. And so if it's aligned with that, I'm in. Let's go. Let's play.
Right.
Any last words of wisdom, Shiva, that you want to share?
I just, like you were talking about, sometimes if we don't have something to measure what matters, we don't have this idea in our heads. What I can say is just go with what gives you peace. And that's what I go with. If it feels like it's right and it takes away the anxiety, it takes away the fear, do that.
Absolutely. 100%. High five to that. Really listen to what gives you peace. Brilliant. Shiva, thank you so much, as always, for being here and being my co-host on the Conscious Educator Playground podcast. Every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, we are going live to record these mini podcasts. And we are also actually having interviews with trusted educators and conscious educators from around the world. And those podcast episodes will be coming out as well. So definitely subscribe and tune in. And you are welcome to join us on our podcast anytime. Just let us know. You can register. And if you need to direct message me, I'll get back to you and give you the link so that you can register and join our conversation live anytime. I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day wherever you're at. And remember, this is a game. Let's play. Let's have fun together. All right. Love you guys. Bye-bye.